Hello. So, when talking about this game, I'm going to need to be brief and not ramble on, because I really like this game. Go 5 game Neptunia Reverse, or as it's known in the West, Neptunia Reverse, is a PS5 exclusive that came out for now as a console exclusive, and it is a remake of Hyperdimension Neptunia Rebirth 1, which was a remake of the original Hyperdimension Neptunia. It is almost the same game, except they changed so many things. Like, for example, in Rebirth 1, you could only have 3 party members, now you can have 4 party members, and there is like a bunch of new modes, and there is an entirely new tracks for the original soundtrack, and there are returning tracks from other games, and there are there's all the DLC in it, and it's pretty much a full definitive version of Rebirth 1. So very briefly going over the graphics, I'm not, even though it's a PS5 game, don't expect this to be competing with Demon's Souls or Miles Morales or anything like that. It's not going to compete with that. For a Neptunia game, it's probably the best looking Neptunia game. But that's not saying too much, since Neptunia has never really gone over the graphics. They always focus on their gameplay, story, and whatnot. They don't focus on the graphics of the game. The animations are a lot better than the other Neptunia games, but they don't focus on graphics. They did recreate the whole game in a brand new engine for this, because the original engine that Rebirth 1 ran on and Rebirth 2 and 3 ran on, that engine wasn't supported by the PlayStation 5 and or the Switch, so they had to remake the whole entire game in a brand new engine. The overall gameplay consists of a sort of strategy type game where you can move anywhere on the map in a vicinity, but you need to stay in, like, I guess the circle of the map, and depending on where you are in the map is depending on where the enemies can hit you. And it's actually a pretty, like, interesting JRPG mechanic that I don't think I've seen any other JRPGs do. And I really cannot explain this game very well, very quickly, and explaining it doesn't really do it justice, honestly. So I'm just going to show gameplay. I don't know if you guys are going to understand it just by looking at the gameplay, but basically you are doing skill combos and building up your overall, like, EX drive, and it's sort of like Xenoblade Chronicles 2 in a way, but you're not always auto-attacking, and it's definitely different. It's a new beast of combat if you've never played a Neptunia game before. Basically, there is Neptune, who is a canceled console back in the 90s called the Sega Neptune, and there is Noir, who is a personification of the PlayStation. There's Vert, who is the personification of the Xbox. And then there is Blonde, or Whiteheart, who is the personification of the Nintendo Wii, I suppose. Just Nintendo in general, I guess. Basically, all these characters get into a war, a console war, like, you know, we see nowadays, and back definitely in the 8th generation of consoles, back when these consoles were actually, but back when Hyperdimension was made, it was back in the 8th generation when things were really rough. They were constantly going at each other's throats, and basically they all go and team up against Neptune. Now, new to Reverse is a mode called Arrange Mode, which is a mode that will start you off in the game with every character in the entire game, and it'll start you off with basically every costume. It'll start you off with a lot of stuff. But on that note, it makes the game harder. A bit harder by quite a bit. I didn't play a lot of Arrange Mode, so I can't quite tell you about that. I beat the normal mode, and I went back through Arrange Mode a little bit. And I can tell you that, so basically you go through a boss fight towards the very start of the game in normal mode, and it's just the boss fight. Like, it's just the character, and they are fighting you. Just them. And in Arrange Mode, I noticed that there are skill jammers, which skill jammers has been a thing in the Neptunia games for a long time now. They basically jam your skills and make you not be able to use skills, and you have to only rely on combos. And there's also item jammers in that boss too. So basically you can't use any items, any skills, and that makes your healer useless too. So it does make the game harder, I think. I can't quite comment on that too much because I only did play that one boss fight. I also noticed the enemies around the world had more agility, which means they get more turns than you. So I think it is harder. There's not a lot online about arrange mode, but from my experience, it is harder. As for the soundtrack, there are original tracks in the game, just a reverse. There are remixes of the Neptunia Action U Unleashed on the Vita. There are remixes of those songs and extended versions of those songs and just basically better versions of those songs. There are songs from Rebirth 3, Rebirth 2, Rebirth 1. There are remade songs, brand new songs. There are just a bunch of songs in this game. And honestly, you probably won't be hearing the same song as much as the other Neptunia games. So the whole game is basically based around shares, which is the market share of how much, I guess, the consumers are praising that video game console. So for example, if we were to take into real lifetime scenarios, Sony would probably have the most shares out of Xbox, and Nintendo would be the second most, and then Xbox would be the least most. So basically, putting all of this into the game, shares matter a lot. Shares is what started the flippin' video game console war. So basically throughout the game, you are increasing your shares, and you are doing quests to increase your shares, and there is a secret ending by getting all your shares to 20%. So there are multiple endings, there are multiple choices, there are things that you can do that will change the game's overall feel, I guess, and you can basically pick a side on who you want to have the most shares and who you don't want to have the most shares, and that can cause conflict as well. So the share system is pretty complicated, but it's overall comes down to complete quests, and it will increase a certain share, and then it will lower another share. So, for example, let's say you want La Station, which is PlayStation, to increase to like 30%, but then Leanbox will end up going down by 5%. Well, you're trading off to make Leanbox go down to make La Station go up. And you have to it's basically a puzzle system there, that you have to balance out the shares evenly, or you could just screw over an entire country. Towards the end of the game, around maybe like chapter 4 or something like that, you can unlock Coliseum, which is basically a horde mode type arena mode that you have to beat a bunch of enemies in a row, and sometimes you can't heal, and sometimes there's a bunch of different conditions. Very basic stuff, pretty standard to have being a JRPG. It's just a challenge mode. Just want to briefly go over that one. On top of range mode and the Coliseum mode, there's also a brand new fishing mode, which is a mode that I go over very briefly in a video that I made earlier, which basically is, this mode is a very crucial mode to make the game a little easier. Basically, you can get weapons, you can get music, you can grind. The fishing mode is a very good idea and a very well executed idea that utilizes the DualSense controller very well. Overall, my final thoughts, so I don't end up rambling like more than I already have, I think the game is very good. It's probably, it's the best version of Rebirth 1 that you can play. The jump from Rebirth 1 to Reverse is massive in my opinion. I think comparing it to Rebirth 1 and saying, oh, it's just Rebirth 1, is honestly not doing it, doing it a disservice. It is a game that has expanded upon Rebirth 1 and has basically remade a game that needed to be remade because of how unfair and unbalanced that game was. And they did a pretty good job remaking the whole thing and adding all the DLC, and basically if this is going to be your first Neptunia game, I would recommend it. The whole thing comes together so well. The story, the gameplay, everything just starts coming together, and you really start feeling really good when you play the game, because you start to strategically, there's so many team comps in the game. Like I said, they give you every character. So there are about 27 characters overall in the whole game. And there's so many team comps that you can make, so many different weapons, so many different discs that you can basically morph, and so many defense buffs, and you can basically make like your health super low but your crit rate super high, and there's just so much room for expanding. I'm rambling a bit now, so in all, I would honestly say I recommend it. If you're a JRPG fan, if you are a Neptunia fan, I'd recommend it. If you've already played through Rebirth 1, maybe you don't need to play it. Those are my final thoughts on the game. I hope that this helped you if you, see this game in the future when it comes out in September and go, what's this game? It looks a little weird. Hope this helped clear things up a little bit on what the game is and my thoughts on it.